You have to be especially cautious on days that seem completely ordinary. It's during those uneventful stretches that life has a way of catching you off guard, where mishaps lurk quietly, and before you know it, you're blindsided, off track, or suddenly irrelevant. It's a bit like that old warning about quiet people, how the calmest ones often hide the wildest storms inside. Both of these insights found their way to me, Alan Webb, in due time, and both would eventually make too much sense. Ellie, my childhood sweetheart, and I tied the knot not long after we both graduated from university and landed decent positions in our respective fields. I began working as a teacher at a nearby junior school, while Ellie took on a role as a nurse at a private hospital not far from our home. We'd done well, solid, respectable jobs with long-term prospects. With our financial stability, the bank had no qualms about approving a loan for our first home. Before long, we were blessed with children. James, who's now 14, and Elaine, who's already 19, became the core of our little world. We often felt they had the best start anyone could ask for. Plenty of friends, consistently good grades, and the kind of healthy sibling rivalry that made Ellie and me chuckle behind closed doors. My marriage to Ellie wasn't some grand passion, but it was steady. We'd argue here and there, mostly when it came to how we raised the kids. Ellie had a fiercely protective instinct, which clashed now and then with my more disciplined, rule-driven approach. She would push back firmly, only to suddenly pull away mid-argument and shift the conversation as though flipping a switch. Eventually, this pattern became our norm. Everything started to come apart one Thursday afternoon. It happened during lunch in the staff room. Even though I taught at the junior high, our building was part of a larger campus, so our staff often mingled with the senior high teachers during breaks. Over time, I'd struck up a few friendships with some of them. That day, I was lucky enough to enjoy a rare lunch without playground duty or stacks of marking to keep me occupied, when Pat Collins, the head of the high school's science department, approached me with an idea. "Hey, Al, mind helping out some of my Year 12 students with a project?" he asked casually. I was always up for lending a hand, but experience had taught me to stay alert. "Let me guess," I said. "You're measuring brain size and want to test the upper limit first?" Pat chuckled. "Nothing quite that flattering," he replied. "We've been loaned a DNA analysis kit from the university, really straightforward stuff. It's for a group of top-tier seniors who've already been scouted for fast-track entry into the uni's science program next year. This kind of access is a first for us." "Sounds impressive," I said, "but where do I come in?" "Well," Pat continued, clearly warming up to the pitch, "we need anonymous DNA samples, ones the students and university can't trace back to anyone here. For safety reasons, we can't use staff or students. You, on the other hand, might be able to help." He leaned in slightly, dropping his voice. "The task is to identify genetic relationships. Out of 2 children, one is biologically linked to the adult donor, the other is not. The students need to determine which is which, using the DNA samples alone. I figured you could help gather those." I paused, thinking it over. He pressed a little. "You'd be doing these students a huge service. Opportunities like this don't come around often." I shrugged. "Sure, why not?" In truth, I had already decided I would use samples from my own kids, but I didn't mention that to Pat. He handed me a set of sealed containers designed to prevent contamination. "Why give me 6 of these?" I asked. "Back up in case you botch a few," he joked. "Right," I shot back. "Because junior school teachers are total amateurs, huh?" It was a running joke between us. Nothing serious, just friendly fire. Thursday night was ideal for collecting the samples. Ellie was working the late shift, which spared me the hassle of explaining my strange little science favor. Elaine was home, studying with her best friend, Patsy Jefferson, who was staying the night. We'd known the Jeffersons, John and Shelley, since our university days. Socially, we saw them often. Shelley was bubbly and easygoing, always enjoyable company. John was friendly enough, though a bit closed off. There was something about him, an expression that flickered across his face sometimes. I couldn't quite name it. Maybe smugness, maybe something deeper. He always seemed to hold back, as if he knew a secret you didn't. Still, Ellie liked them, and that was enough reason to keep the friendship going. Parting the hair samples turned out to be a much simpler task than I had anticipated. Collecting my own was effortless, and obtaining one from Elaine was as easy as slipping into the bathroom and picking a strand off the comb she kept in her cabinet. Each of us had our designated space, and Elaine was meticulous about using her own brush, just like Ellie. I got Patsy's hair by accident. The two girls were messing around in the living room, taking a break from their studies, when Patsy tumbled near the dining area and caught her shoulder-length hair on one of the chair backs. Elaine burst out laughing, nearly crying with amusement as Patsy struggled to free herself from the wooden trap. Eventually, Patsy managed to pull herself loose, but a few wisps of hair remained snagged on the chair. Jackpot. That made 3 hair samples. Next, I slipped into James's room and plucked a strand from his pillow. He had no clue. His headphones were on, and he was completely absorbed in whatever music he was playing. So now I had 4 samples in total. My own, Elaine's, James's, and Patsy's, 2 siblings, 1 outsider, and myself. With 2 containers left and not wanting to waste them, I figured I might as well include Ellie's hair for comparison. I retrieved hers from her comb, just like before. Why not? A little extra data never hurt. I labeled the samples methodically, A through E, and wrote down the corresponding names. A was mine, B and C were Elaine and James, D was Patsy, and E was Ellie. I was genuinely excited to see what would come back. It felt like a good exercise for the students, a sort of practical challenge to fine-tune their analysis skills before university. The following day, I handed the labeled samples to Pat. He looked a bit puzzled when he noticed the 2 additional vials, but agreed they would add complexity and realism to the exercise. Since it was Friday, I didn't expect to hear anything right away. The following week, I carried on with my regular routine, not thinking much about it. A few days later, while I was in the staff room, Pat came up to me with news. "Hey, Al," he said, "the kids got the DNA results back. They're over the moon. The university mentors were really impressed by how well the students handled the equipment and the testing process, especially considering how little formal training they've had." He added, "Honestly, this group has real potential." Giving them 5 samples was a smart call. It made them think harder and analyze more deeply. Anyway, here's the report. I don't need to know who's who, but thanks again. I waited until I got home to open the envelope. I had the whole day set aside to prepare for my 6th grade lesson, so there was no rush. Inside was a cleanly written report. It first outlined the technique used to sequence the DNA from each sample. That was followed by a table summarizing the genetic relationships between the samples. The results were as follows. Sample A had no genetic link to any of the other samples. Sample E was biologically related to B and C. Sample D also showed a relationship to B and C. E and D, however, were not genetically related to each other. The report confirmed that the data had been verified by the university's DNA lab, which stated the likelihood of error was extremely minimal. Following this was a glowing review of the students' work, commending them for their accuracy and discipline during the entire procedure. The final line read, "All results are conclusively correct." I didn't grasp the full weight of what I'd read until I looked at it again. My hand started trembling. The data was indisputable. Sample A, my sample, was unrelated to B and C, my supposed children. That couldn't be possible. I was their father. And yet Ellie's DNA was a match. But Patsy too? How could she be genetically linked to Elaine and James? My thoughts spiraled. I bounced from one idea to the next, unable to settle on a single explanation. One chilling realization kept resurfacing. My entire married life had been a lie. I had been a fool. "No, Ellie, no, no, no," I cried out to the silence of the house. There was no one home to hear me, but the quiet felt suffocating, and I suddenly collapsed onto the cold kitchen floor, stunned and paralyzed. "Daddy? Daddy, are you okay? What's wrong?" Elaine's voice jolted me out of my stupor. It sliced through my dazed mind and brought me crashing back to reality. "I think so," I murmured under my breath. My eyelids were still heavy, and through the fog of semi-consciousness, I made out a hazy image, my daughter's face, twisted with concern. Elaine, or was it her? That dreadful thought crept back into my mind, forcing me upright. I jerked my body forward, shaking off the remnants of sleep and confusion. My hand instinctively ran through my hair and came to rest on a tender swelling, right where my skull had hit the floor. "Damn!" I hissed as pain flared and my fingertips came away stained with blood. Elaine, quick as ever, was suddenly kneeling beside me, pressing a tissue to the wound and offering a glass of cold water, an ice pack in her other hand. "Thanks," I muttered, taking a small sip and gently applying the ice to my head. "I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I was just looking through this report, and the next thing I knew, I heard you calling me." I trailed off, groaning softly. I must have blacked out or slipped or something. I think I'll be okay in a few minutes. Just need to lie down for a bit. I'm heading to my room. James and your mom should be back soon anyway. Can you keep an eye on dinner?" "Of course, Dad," she said, nodding. "But you really scared me." "For a second there, I thought you were having a heart attack or something. I was mentally reviewing CPR techniques from gym class," she added with a sheepish smile. "I love you. Go get some rest." Her words struck me deeper than any chest pain could, because she was my daughter, but also painfully she wasn't. Elaine loved me like a father, and I loved her like she was my own. But the truth remained, I wasn't her biological dad. I was the idiot who footed the bill for her childhood, the man who rocked her to sleep when she was sick, who suffered through the drama and tantrums of adolescence, who changed diapers in the middle of the night and kissed her forehead before she caught the school bus every morning. But I wasn't her father, not really. A paternity test had confirmed that delivering not just disappointment but devastation. It hadn't left a bruise, it shattered my heart. I dropped heavily into the living room chaise, letting it absorb me. I needed to sit, to think. But about what exactly? About Ellie, my wife, my partner, the woman I thought I knew. She'd betrayed me not once, but at least twice. And if there were two known betrayals, spaced years apart, how many more might be buried in between? What happened in the spaces between those moments? And more hauntingly, was something still going on even now? How did Ellie, my Ellie, manage to do this? She wasn't just my spouse. We were a team. Everyone said so. Friends would point to us and call us the model couple. We rarely fought. We built a life together. So how? How? The question slipped from my mouth without conscious thought, repeating like a broken chant. I didn't even notice Elaine had returned until she was beside me again, holding out a fresh cup of coffee. "I don't know how either, Daddy," she said quietly, assuming my question was about the fall. "There's nothing down there you could have tripped on. The floor's bone dry. Oh, and I found this. Must have been what you were reading earlier. It looks like some science article or something." She held out the wrinkled printout, frowning a little. "You should really read this stuff sitting down, Daddy." With a teasing scowl and a muttered curse, she handed me the coffee, blessing me with one hand and, damn her, also delivering the very document that had likely triggered this collapse. "Thanks, Lainey," I said, using the affectionate nickname I always reserved for her when she playfully reprimanded me. She gave a warm smile before disappearing back into the kitchen to check on dinner. I exhaled deeply. I had to calm myself, think rationally, process the facts. If I didn't pull myself together, I risked destroying what was left. My relationship with Ellie and with the children. My children? Ellie had lied. She'd had an affair with John Jefferson, maybe twice, maybe more. My hands started to tremble again. Panic surged. I had to get control over this storm raging inside me, right now, before it took everything down with it. Luckily, my experience as a teacher had conditioned me well for this kind of juggling act, handling multiple crises at once, especially when it involved the ever-challenging dynamics of parents entrusting their kids to me year after year. By the time I had drained the last of my coffee and felt the melting ice sliding slowly down my cheek, I had already formulated a plan in my head. And right on cue, James and Ellie came strolling in. "You all right, Dad?" James asked, half concerned, half amused. "Feeling your age yet, old man?" he teased, peering closely at the cut on my forehead. "Maybe it's time for a wheelchair," he added with a chuckle, before heading off to his room with a grin. Ellie, however, took a more clinical interest. "What happened, Al?" she asked, inspecting the injury with a nurse's eye. No stitches necessary, but you'll need to keep it iced. Then she noticed the cloth on my head and sighed. What on earth was Elaine thinking, using one of the nice tea towels for this? She shook her head and disappeared, calling out as she left, I'll grab a proper napkin and fresh ice. She returned shortly, carefully applying the new compress, her hands methodical and calm. I kept my composure, but inside I flinched every time her fingers grazed the wound, not because it hurt physically, but because I could no longer deny the emotional sting. Of course, Ellie just assumed I was wincing from the pain. Don't be dramatic, she murmured softly, brushing my arm as I instinctively leaned away. Dinner's almost ready. I'm going to take a quick shower. She laughed, the picture of a cheerful daughter cooking for her injured father. I didn't laugh as I made my way upstairs and sat at the dinner table, the motion stiff and automatic. My family. The words echoed in my mind with bitter irony. I nearly lost consciousness at one point, overwhelmed, but thankfully everyone chalked up my odd demeanor to the fall. No one questioned it. Later, as I climbed into bed, a realization hit me like a thunderclap. I had survived my first day as a man living with betrayal. I had made it through. Being a teacher came with a few built-in perks. One of them was the allowance of a few personal days per year. Given the high demands of the profession, these could also be claimed as mental health days, one of the rare blessings of being part of a union. I decided it was time to cash one in. I scheduled a meeting with the assistant principal to arrange a week away from school. She knew my history and immediately sensed that something was off. This is out of the blue, Al. Is there something going on? She asked, her tone soft but probing. I shook my head slightly. Not something I want to get into. I just need some time to handle personal issues. I sighed. Right now, I'm not in the right mindset for teaching. I wouldn't be doing my students any favors. She looked at me for a long second and nodded. Okay, you've earned the benefit of the doubt. Take the time you need. I'll have someone cover your classes. Just leave your lesson plans on your desk before you go. That weekend felt like I had stepped into an alternate reality. I kept up appearances around the house, engaging in casual conversation and handling chores as though everything were fine. But I made sure to keep my distance from Ellie, constantly inventing yard tasks and errands to excuse my absence. Mealtimes were the hardest. They had always been the setting for warm, playful exchanges, but now I had to focus intently just to fake a smile or respond to light-hearted jokes. I couldn't bring myself to look Ellie in the eyes. I pretended. I forced it. And each time I heard James and Elaine laugh together or saw them interact so naturally, my heart broke just a little more. At night, I made sure to go to bed early, citing exhaustion from outdoor work and the lingering effects of my fall. Ellie didn't seem particularly fazed by my withdrawal. In fact, if I wasn't already suspicious, I might have missed what looked like a faint breath of relief when I turned in early. By Monday morning, I followed my usual routine like clockwork. Ellie had an entire week of day shifts, which meant she would be gone while I would typically be at school. James was busy with high school, and Elaine had her own demanding university schedule, which left me completely free, under the guise of a normal school week. Perfect. With the house to myself, I could begin the real investigation. My teacher instincts kicked in and I compiled a rational, systematic list of tasks. First, comb through Ellie's personal belongings for any clues, anything that might help me answer the questions tormenting me. Who, when, where, why? Second, monitor her work-related behavior. If something was going on, it had to be connected to her job. She never went out solo or attended girls' nights. There were no red flags socially, only professionally. And so my search for answers began. 1. Install a GPS tracker on Ellie's car. 2. Monitor John Jefferson's whereabouts. 3. Get in touch with a lawyer and explore all legal avenues. The first task was fairly straightforward, especially since I already had access to the house. I conducted a meticulous sweep of the place. I turned over every drawer in Ellie's dresser, dug through the nightstand, and even ventured into the attic. Not a single damning piece of evidence turned up. Still, something felt off. One particular photo album on the shelf showed signs of frequent use. The rest were coated with a fine layer of dust, but this one looked as though it had been picked up and replaced over and over. I only caught it because I was sitting in my usual chair, quietly sipping coffee, reflecting on where else I might search. Driven by curiosity, I removed what appeared to be an unused photo album. No one had paid any attention to the albums, so why had this one been opened so recently? What I found inside stunned me. It was practically a tribute to John. Photos of him from his university days filled the pages. Some of them were with Ellie, in poses that were undeniably intimate. Clearly, these were taken while they were still in college. Sure, college years can be chaotic, boundaries often blurred. But saving such photos for years? That crossed a line. Especially considering we had agreed to be exclusive during our time at university. Things only got worse. There were snapshots of John cradling Elaine when she was a baby. And then came the most gut-wrenching image. John, Ellie, and newborn Elaine together at the hospital, beaming like a happy family. The album continued in sequence, similar shots, now including James. They were smiling, posing in various locations that, disturbingly, I recognized. We had visited those places together. These pictures must have been taken when I was distracted or simply out of the frame. I couldn't recall a single instance when someone had taken these photos while I was nearby. They were never casually displayed afterward either. All the images taken outside regular gatherings had one common thread. Most of them were snapped at a local hospital. Ellie often wore medical gowns in the shots, and in some she was dressed in surprisingly revealing outfits. That used to be something I admired. Ellie had always been stunning and dressed right. She could stop any man in his tracks. But this time I felt no admiration, just betrayal. She hadn't dressed that way for me. It was for him, for John. Suddenly, all those subtle glances between them at parties made sense. The half-smiles, the fleeting looks. I could almost hear John's inner monologue mocking me. John, that clueless idiot. He has no idea that Ellie and I have our own thing going. He doesn't even know we share what he thinks are his kids. In that moment, it felt as though reality cracked and I fell into some parallel world. Everything I believed in, my marriage, my children, my home, felt like a carefully constructed illusion. It's terrifying how fast lifelong love can curdle into seething hatred. But that's exactly what happened in that unreal version of my life. And yet, I didn't collapse. I didn't let the grief drag me down. I had plans. That photo album, ironically, became the catalyst that released every ounce of love I'd held for Ellie. Once emptied, all that love was left to die quietly on the floor of the den. I scanned every image and locked them away in a password-protected folder on my computer. I wanted the evidence safe and secure. Now it was time to move on to step 2 on my list. By then it was 11 a.m. Ellie's lunch hour was always at noon, so I had a full hour to get to the hospital and observe her routine. I brought my camera with a long-range lens, just in case. The parking lot wasn't full yet, and I lucked out with a space tucked away near the rear. From there, I could watch the hospital entrance without being seen. At 11:55, John appeared. He strode into the building with the air of someone who'd done it dozens of times before. At exactly 12 o'clock, Ellie came out. And though everything looked casual on the surface, my stomach twisted when I saw them holding hands. In that instant, whatever affection I had left for Ellie turned into burning rage. Rage at her. Rage at him. My camera whirred into action on its own, snapping frame after frame of them walking toward Ellie's car, thankfully parked far from mine. They kissed before getting in. Then the car pulled away. I followed at a careful distance, keeping myself just out of view. They moved with the confidence of people who believed they were entirely alone. No glances over their shoulders, no detours or unnecessary turns, just a straight path as if the idea of being followed had never crossed their minds. After all this time, they had grown far too comfortable, convinced that their secret lives were untouchable. They assumed I was exactly where I was supposed to be, tucked away in a classroom like every other weekday. Why would they suspect otherwise? The car pulled up outside a modest hotel just a few blocks from the hospital, one of those budget places often used by patients' families coming in from out of town. They exited quickly, barely stopping before hurrying through the doors and heading toward the front desk. From where I sat, I could tell they knew the place well. The receptionist barely looked up before handing them a key, like it was all routine. They vanished into the elevator, and I stepped inside the lobby, playing the part of a passerby casually browsing. I made a comment about the couple being in quite the rush. Her response sliced through me like ice. It hit deeper than I was ready for. Rage boiled beneath the surface, threatening to erupt in a torrent of curses and accusations. She smiled and said, "Oh yes, they come here all the time. Rent the same room 4 times a week, grab a little takeout on the way. Isn't it sweet? You don't see that kind of dedication in married couples these days." Married couples? She should be married to me. But the receptionist kept talking, unaware of what she was tearing open inside me. "I've been working here 15 years. They're like clockwork. Monday to Thursday every week. Even when Elsie was expecting, she and James kept coming. Never miss a visit, except during school holidays, that is." She gave a polite smile. "So, are you interested in booking a room yourself?" I managed to croak out a, "No, thank you," pretending to be a business rep scouting accommodation for colleagues. Then I stumbled outside, somehow holding myself together until I reached my car. A little over an hour later, they re-emerged, relaxed, carefree, both munching on sandwiches. I recognized that look on Ellie's face, the lightness in her step. She was enjoying herself, no doubt about it. My camera clicked again, capturing the moment, and I sat there seething. The urge to leap out and tear them both apart was almost overwhelming. That's how I saw them now. Him a bastard, and her a traitorous whore. They drove off, and I remained motionless in the car, numb with disbelief and fury. The receptionist spotted me and gave a friendly wave, probably on her lunch break now. Just being courteous, thinking I was a future client. She strolled over, asking if I needed more information about the hotel's services. I smiled stiffly, said no, and thanked her before driving off. Once home, I added the new photos to my growing folder and checked the next task on my agenda. And to think it was only Monday. A quick online search turned up a small GPS tracker, inconspicuous and currently on sale at a nearby electronics shop. It was just past 2 p.m., plenty of time to buy it and still be home by my normal hour. $200 later, I was holding the device and a slim instruction booklet. By 3:30, I was back at the house pretending to label folders at the table when Elaine bounced through the door. "Hi, Dad. I'm home. Hope today wasn't another disaster," she joked before slipping into her room, giggling. The afternoon unfolded like usual. James arrived around 4, and Ellie made her way to the shower. By 5, dinner was underway. By 6, it was on the table. At 6:30, we were all sitting down, talking and eating like any typical family. The conversation was light, small updates, harmless gossip, nothing seemed out of place. Ellie looked perfectly normal, as if nothing had happened. She carried on like this double life was just another part of her schedule. No guilt, no hesitation. I excused myself early, pretending that this year's teaching load was wearing me out. Everyone was used to that by now, no one questioned it. But sleep didn't come easily. I tossed and turned, the images of earlier replaying on a loop. By early morning, I gave up. Coffee and cold water on my face snapped me into motion. I slipped outside, installed the GPS tracker under Ellie's car, then configured the app on my computer. After fine-tuning the settings, I went back inside, made breakfast, and got ready as if it were any other school day. By 9 a.m., I was alone again, ready to tackle the rest of my list. The tracker would just confirm her patterns, matching her visits to the hospital. That was all I needed. Hard proof. I didn't need to follow James anymore. I already knew what he was doing with Ellie. That box was checked. Next came the legal step. I searched for divorce attorneys nearby. There were dozens. I picked one randomly and called. They had an opening that very day. At 11, I found myself sitting nervously in a quiet waiting room. A neatly dressed receptionist sat typing at her computer, the keys tapping like a metronome, marking the seconds of my unraveling life. He called me in at 11:15 sharp and guided me into a room that felt like it belonged in another century. Polished wood surfaces, towering bookshelves crammed with leather-bound volumes. The scent in the air was rich and aged like parchment and pipe tobacco. It was a place steeped in intellect and memory. "Hello, Mr. Webb," she greeted, offering a professional nod. "Mind if I call you Al?" I hadn't even had time to respond before she steamrolled ahead. "I'm Jane Lober. I specialize in divorce law. Tell me what brings you in, Allie." It took me a moment to gather myself. Then, with a deep breath, I spilled everything that had happened over the past several days. Somewhere along the way, I broke. Without realizing it, tears had begun rolling down my cheeks, unstoppable. It was the first time I truly said it all out loud. The first time I allowed myself to confront it. Jane, ever prepared, kept handing me tissues from a box that might as well have been bottomless. She scribbled notes without interruption, occasionally murmuring a or a quiet okay as I unloaded. When I finished, silence settled between us. I wiped my face while she reviewed her notes. Then she looked up at me, her gaze sharp over the rim of her glasses. "Well, Al," she said finally, "that's quite the story. Do you have evidence to back this all up?" The way she peered at me, with her chin tilted down and her eyes peeking over her frames, reminded me of how my high school principal used to interrogate me. I rattled off the items I had: photos, texts, times, places. I didn't mention the GPS tracker I'd used. I wasn't sure if it crossed a legal line, and I didn't want that argument now. She nodded slightly. "All right, based on this, you've got a solid case for retroactive child support from John. Alienation of affection is also possible, but you'd have to demonstrate that he deliberately manipulated Ellie into the relationship. From what you've told me, that might be a stretch." She leaned back and continued. "As for your marriage, it looks like divorce is inevitable. You need to understand that infidelity, no matter how painful, isn't illegal. Wedding vows are symbolic, not enforceable in court. This means your financial settlement will be neutral. You and Ellie both have steady incomes, so spousal support likely won't be a factor. Elaine is an adult now at 19. She doesn't fall under custody rules. But James, his living arrangement will impact how assets are divided. The house, for instance, would likely go 70% to the parent who gets primary custody. Money and other property will be split by court order." She looked at me again over those glasses. "This won't be an easy road. Are you sure you want to pursue this?" I hesitated, thinking about everything I had uncovered. The DNA tests. The photo album Ellie had once proudly called her love story. The hotel room. "Yes," I said with quiet certainty. "I'm sure." "Good," Jane said briskly. "I'll get the paperwork together. It'll be ready by Thursday. Once you sign, we just need to decide how you want John and Ellie served. Email, fax, text. Send all the necessary financial documentation listed in this packet to my assistant. We'll get this underway. And Al, don't do anything rash. Stay within the law." She stood, motioned toward the hallway, and before I realized it, I was back in the waiting room. 3 other people sat there, each looking as anxious as I had felt. For a moment, I thought, at least I'm not the only one. But that wasn't true. I was alone, utterly painfully alone. Who could I confide in now? Ellie had always been my emotional anchor. Elaine, James, how could I break their trust and upend their world like this? It would devastate them, maybe even more than it was hurting me. Then there was John's family. His sister Patsy, his mother Shelley. What would this do to them knowing the truth? My resolve, so strong in Jane's office, began to waver. Could I justify dragging everyone into this mess? If I let it go, the only person who'd suffer was me. But could I live with that burden? Back at home, I found myself in the quiet of my room, staring at nothing, thinking. Take action or stay silent? That was the dilemma. I gave a hollow chuckle at the echo of Hamlet's famous line. No wisdom to be found in my little tragedy, though. There was nothing to laugh about. I reached for a drink. I didn't like drinking alone, but a large glass of red wine offered its own kind of wordless sympathy. It was sad, really, how that glass had become my most reliable companion. I caught myself before finishing the bottle, leaving it on the counter. Just the glass would do for now. By the time I drained it, the clock read 3 in the afternoon. 2 hours had passed in a blur. But I had made up my mind. I tucked away the evidence of my solitary spiral and began cooking dinner. Soon the house would no longer be empty. Ellie burst into the house with her usual bright hello, then darted to her bedroom for a shower, with James trailing closely behind. "James, don't leave your school bag in my car," she called over her shoulder, heading for our bathroom. Typical, I thought. Ellie had made it a routine to jump straight into the shower after work. Her official reason was always to avoid bringing home any germs from the hospital to her poor, unsuspecting family. But by now, I knew better. The shower was a convenient way to wash away more than bacteria. It was a way to erase any trace of her double life. And that name? James. That was the alias John had used at the hotel. The pieces were coming together fast. My determination only deepened. I knew what had to happen next. The following morning, I woke up early. I headed directly to Ellie's car and removed the GPS tracker. There was no longer any need for it. The previous day's movements showed she was sticking to her usual pattern. I also did a bit of quiet sabotage under the hood, just enough to make sure the engine wouldn't turn over. Back in the kitchen not long after, I carried on as if it were any other morning. I made breakfast and kept to the usual rhythm of our routine. "James, let's go, we're running late," Ellie shouted. "I have to be at the hospital on time." "No," I thought coldly. "You're eager to meet up with your lover." They headed to the garage as always, but this time the car wouldn't cooperate. "Al, the car won't start," Ellie called out, frustrated. "Can you come take a look?" I descended the stairs slowly, deliberately unhurried. Opening the hood, I started poking around at random wires, giving her the usual mechanics lines. "Try it now, how about now?" Then I straightened up and delivered the verdict. "Sorry, Elle, looks like you and James are catching the bus today." "I'd drive you, but I've got an early meeting at school," I lied smoothly. She wasn't pleased, but knew the clock was against her. The walk to the bus stop was 5 minutes, and if they missed this one, it would be another half-hour wait. James looked equally annoyed. Public transport wasn't exactly the cool way to show up at school. At least the bus dropped them both off right at their destinations, so it wasn't a complete disaster. Off they went, both grumbling under their breath. James, about the embarrassment of the bus ride. Ellie, well, she said nothing, but I knew she was stewing about how she'd miss out on her usual stolen time with her lover. Without her car, there'd be no rendezvous. Tough break, I thought. Back inside, I watched Elaine head off for her day and then took the time to clean up. I had someone important to see. Shelley was clearly stunned when she opened the door and saw me standing there at 9:30. "Al, what a surprise! Shouldn't you be at work?" Then she laughed, realizing what she sounded like. "Listen to me, I sound like a school principal catching a student skipping class. Sorry, come in. Where's Ellie?" She was clearly puzzled by my visit, but remained warm and welcoming. We made our way to the backyard, a familiar space where our families had shared countless barbecues and drinks. "Coffee?" she offered as I took a seat on the patio. "That'd be great, thanks." She returned shortly with 2 steaming mugs, placing them on the little table between us. "All right, Al." Spill. "What's going on? Why are you here on a school day and without Ellie?" She sensed something was off. Women always do. "Shelley, this won't be easy to hear," I began. "I've debated for a while whether to even bring it up, but you know me. I believe in doing the right thing." As I began laying everything out, her face grew paler by the moment, but she never interrupted. She let me speak. "I'm not going to sugarcoat any of this," I warned and dove in. I laid bare everything I had uncovered. I also told her what I had learned about Allie and John's current situation. At that point, she suddenly jumped up, waving her arms as tears welled up in her eyes. She stumbled away, sobbing uncontrollably. When she returned, she was carrying a massive box of tissues, 2 bottles of red wine, and 2 big glasses. "To hell with the coffee, Al." "I need this," she said, voice trembling. "The second bottle is yours. If you don't drink it, I will." I reached for the glass and filled them both, letting the deep red wine swirl into each. "Tell me again, what exactly did those bastards do?" I went over the entire story once more, every detail I could remember. "That's all I need to hear," she said in a low, icy voice. "That lying, 2-timing bastard is finished. The divorce papers will be drafted today." She disappeared into the house, phone in hand, and when she came back out, she said, "My old friend from high school is a divorce lawyer. She's incredibly busy, but she's making time for me today, 2 p.m. She gave me a look. "I might need copies of those photos you've got." Shelley's eyes were swollen and red from crying. "I just don't get it, Al. Why come to me first and then torch Ellie like that?" I looked at her, feeling the depth of her pain. I understood completely. I was shaking with fury back then. I needed revenge instantly, like ripping off a bandage. I thought shock and devastation would be my weapons. But as I watched her break and imagined what this would do to the kids, to both of us, I hesitated. I couldn't carry all this alone anymore. "No, you go handle John. Get what's yours first. I'll take care of Ellie after." I hadn't wanted to drag him through the courts and risk you and Patsy ending up with nothing. That wouldn't have been right. I stopped talking. She was starting to understand where I was coming from. God, Al, she said softly, you've always been the honest one, the good guy. How could Ellie do that to you, and John, to me and Patsy, for years? You must feel like hell. She paused. I know I do. Then she came over, wrapped her arms around me, and held on tight. We're both going to need someone to lean on through all of this, she whispered. Her hug was full of comfort, kindness. We sat like that, arms around each other, crying hard into each other's shoulders. I hadn't realized until then just how much I'd needed that. The connection, the empathy, it cut through all the chaos. And for the first time in a long while, it felt okay. The wine sat untouched as we stayed locked in that quiet, broken embrace. We didn't speak, didn't need to. Eventually, naturally, we let go. I'll speak to Patsy, Shelley said. I won't spill every ugly detail about who John's been screwing, but I'll say enough so she understands. It's obvious now he's been cheating for years. She met my eyes. I won't tip Ellie off, don't worry. I'll keep it vague enough to make her squirm, to leave her wondering just how much I know. I left Shelley's house feeling steadier, like the path ahead was finally clear. Let her confront John, claim her half of their life together, quietly, efficiently. If we kept the affair itself under wraps, no one else would get dragged in too soon. That would give me the time I needed to prepare for what was next. Shelley was sharp. She knew what she was doing. The next day, John got served at his office. Not discreetly, not quietly. His colleagues were gathering for a meeting when a court officer marched in, called out his name, and in front of everyone declared, "You've been served." Then, with a grin and a final blow, he added, "Your wife says she can't stay married to a man who's been sleeping with another married woman? The same woman who gave him 2 children." Gasps, murmurs, silence. And just like that, the man vanished. He'd been paid extra to make that dramatic exit, though he probably wouldn't be getting gigs like that again anytime soon. From that moment, John became a pariah. Colleagues kept their distance. No one chatted with him unless absolutely necessary. He'd sit down and people would shift away. Even his manager, a man married for 45 years, called him in and let him have it. Told him he lacked morals, that he was a disgrace. Questioned whether a man with such poor judgment should even stay at the company. The manager didn't hide his disgust. And he told John, point blank, that his job would be terminated the moment the divorce became official. John was left with just 60 days to secure a new job, a daunting task in a community where rumors spread like wildfire. At the same time, curious developments were unfolding within the Webb household. Ellie's car, oddly enough, had been stuck in the shop for far longer than anyone would consider normal. Each week brought a new call from the mechanic, citing some obscure mechanical issue as the reason for the delay. This odd situation gave Ellie the perfect excuse to start using public transportation more regularly, but it also caused noticeable tension to creep into her relationship with John. For 2 people who had grown accustomed to private getaways and stress-free rendezvous, every lunch meeting now carried the weight of risk. Their usual hotel was no longer an option. After they missed several reservations, the front desk clerk phoned John and informed him their standing booking had been canceled. From that point on, their clandestine meetings were forced into a far less romantic setting: hospital storerooms. These storage spaces were tight, reeked of disinfectants and chemicals, and always carried the risk of being stumbled upon by maintenance staff. One day, that risk became reality. A contractor pushed open the door and caught them mid-encounter. Though he shut the door immediately, he reopened it seconds later, this time with his phone recording. They exited the storeroom in a flash and never went back. Unfortunately for them, that contractor happened to know a nurse who knew someone else, and soon the footage was making its rounds. Ellie and John never received the video directly, but I did. It joined a growing collection I kept in a special folder titled Cheaters. At home, I continued to wear the mask of serenity. The rhythm of daily life had been long established, making it surprisingly easy to maintain appearances. The only noticeable shift was the total absence of physical affection between Ellie and me. What puzzled me was how Allie hadn't brought up this sudden change in dynamic. But her thoughts seemed consumed by what was happening between Shelley and John. Always anxious, Allie was clearly shaken by her sporadic, risky meetings with John at work. She must have lived in constant fear that someone would uncover her identity, that she was the other married woman named in the court filings. Maybe she chalked up her luck to sheer chance. Sometimes she'd stay late at the hospital, citing overtime as the reason. I knew better. Those hours were being spent in John's company somewhere private. Although fury simmered just beneath the surface, I wore my calm demeanor like armor. Elaine, perceptive as ever, confronted me in the kitchen one evening while I was preparing dinner. Allie and James hadn't returned yet. "Dad," she said cautiously, "are you and Mom all right?" She looked concerned. "You two just don't seem like yourselves anymore. Mom's always tense, and you're, I don't know, acting too normal. It's weird. Look at what happened with Patsy's parents. I don't want anything like that to happen to you guys." She paused. "Their divorce is being finalized next week. Patsy's always crying now. Her dad barely comes home and they're selling the house." Her voice dropped. "She told me her father was cheating for years and that he's got 2 kids with another married woman." I studied her face. Sweet Lainey, female intuition was alive and well in her teenage brain. I kept my tone steady. "That's sad to hear, honey. But you know every couple goes through ups and downs, right? If there's ever something you need to worry about, I promise I'll tell you first." I smiled. "Now, isn't this usually when you go rushing up to your room?" She left the kitchen, but I knew the time would come when I'd have to reveal the truth to her, something I dreaded deeply. "How do you tell the girl you've raised for 19 years that she isn't your biological daughter?" As for Shelley and John, their divorce was set to be finalized the following week. I knew because I'd been in regular contact with Shelley. Her lawyer had confirmed she was entitled to 80% of their shared assets, which would give her a strong financial foundation to begin again. Amazingly, not a single person had connected the dots to reveal the identity of the other woman involved. That secrecy had been vital to the success of my plans. Then the day came. John and Shelley were officially divorced. The house was sold, and Shelley relocated to a nearby town, where she secured a new job and settled into a home suited to a single mother. Patsy, surprisingly adaptable, accepted the change. She frequently visited Elaine for sleepovers and seemed to lean on her for emotional support. Still, she remained closely attached to her mother. Whenever Shelley wasn't home when Patsy returned, she'd immediately call to find out where she was. Shelley and I stayed in touch, meeting occasionally for friendly, quiet conversations. That mutual support helped both of us survive the web of lies and betrayal with minimal damage. As for the bastard, he lost his job as expected and ended up in a dead-end part-time gig. Now it was my turn to set the wheels of revenge in motion. That Wednesday, Ellie returned home from work as she usually did. She was heading toward the bedroom to shower when I called out to her from the living room. "Ellie, I know everything about you and John." The look on her face was like something out of a movie. She froze mid-step on the staircase, her hand clutching the railing for support. Her face drained of all color, and she nearly stumbled. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I didn't intend to be gentle. The resentment I had buried for years surged to the surface with a vengeance. "I'm saying I know about your affair with John. How it's been going on for at least 19 years, I yelled. Thankfully, Elaine and James were out, wrapped up in their sports activities. "You spent our entire marriage lying to me, sleeping with another man, and having 2 children who aren't even mine, yet letting me believe they were." The betrayal, the deceit, it was impossible to comprehend. "I'm not even going to ask for your reasons. Nothing you say could ever make this right." I had uncovered the truth over the past 3.5 months. "For your information, John will be here tonight at exactly 8 o'clock. I'd chosen the time deliberately. By then, Elaine and James would be home, likely done with the dinner I prepared like always. I was leaving. My bags were already in the car. I had no intention of setting foot in that house of lies ever again. If she needed to reach me, my lawyer's number was on the divorce documents. I knew James and Elaine would be desperate for answers, and I had hoped I'd be the one to tell them the truth about what their mother had done, about what it meant. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. I knew that if I opened my mouth, I'd lose control and say things that would scar them forever. This was her mess. She would have to explain it. I could handle my own devastation, but dragging James and Elaine into that pain prematurely was something I just couldn't do. All of this, I shouted. Letting the fury out helped drain some of it. Ellie crumpled on the stairs, groaning softly. No, no. But I felt nothing for her, not sorrow, not regret. Instead, I walked back to the kitchen and finished preparing dinner for the kids and for her. Oddly enough, I felt composed as I set the table. I placed 2 envelopes down, one for each child, in their regular seats. The letters inside were identical. They said, "Dear James and Lainey, I wish with all my heart you didn't have to be put in this position. If there had been any other way to spare you from this pain and humiliation, I would have taken it. Please understand that I love you both more deeply than words can express. From the moment you came into this world, I have given everything I have to raise you and help you become the incredible people you are today. If you ever feel the need to reach out to me, and I hope you will, my new phone number is 02-237-86712. Please don't share this number with your mother. I can't endure any more contact with her. I hope what she tells you doesn't break your spirit the way it shattered mine. Just know that I love you. Always. Dad." Making the decision to leave tore me apart. Even though biology said otherwise in every way that mattered, I was their father, and had been every day of their lives. I fought back tears as I stepped out of the kitchen, walked through the house for the last time, and entered the garage. Ellie remained slumped on the stairs, her face buried in her hands. As far as I was concerned, she no longer existed. Still, I silently hoped she would find the courage to tell Elaine and James the truth. Now it was her turn to pay the price for the wreckage she and John had caused. I drove to the small rental house I had quietly secured the week before. There was space for Elaine and James if they ever chose to come, but that choice, sadly, would have to be theirs. Tears blurred my vision as I drove, and I feared I might crash. Somehow I made it. I unlocked the door to the house that was now my new beginning. And just as I stepped inside, I heard a voice behind me. "Figured you might need a little company tonight." It was Shelley. Good, reliable Shelley. The one person who had kept me grounded through the hell of the past few months. I collapsed into her embrace, and the floodgates opened again, just like they had 3 months earlier at her place. All the feelings I had been holding back, fury, resentment, confusion, doubt, betrayal, they surged to the surface and poured out of me uncontrollably. I broke down completely, trembling and mumbling incoherently, a wreck in every sense. Shelley didn't question it. She gently guided me inside, helped me sit on the couch, and simply held me without saying a word. I have no idea how long it took before I could say anything that made sense. Eventually, all I managed to whisper was, "Thank you, Shelley." Before I could say more, she stopped me. There was no time for talking. We had things to deal with. By 7 a.m., both our phones were ringing simultaneously, insistent and loud. Elaine was calling me, and Patsy was trying to reach Shelley. Apparently, they had both been calling all night without luck. I picked up my phone. "Lainey, my darling, how are you holding up?" I asked. Her choked sobs answered more than any words could. "I love you, sweetheart," I said softly. "Nothing will ever change that. I'll love you forever." Her crying slowed a little. "Dad, I love you too," she whispered. "I'm heartbroken over what Mom did to you. I don't know how to feel about her anymore. Part of me still sees her the way I always have. But another part of me just sees this horrible, lying woman who betrayed all of us for so long. Can I come see you? Where do you live now? Are we still okay? Am I still your daughter? I love you so much. But being near you hurts so badly. James wants to see you too. Can we come right now?" She broke down again on the other end. I did my best to soothe her, assuring her I would pick them both up within the hour. I didn't tell her about the situation with Shelley just yet. There was still work to do before I could bring them fully into it. Patsy had also asked Shelley if she could visit. She sounded exhausted and apologized for being up all night. I drove over and found James and Elaine waiting outside the house we used to call home. They were carrying backpacks and clutching pillows. Trying to lighten the mood, I smiled and asked, "Planning to go camping?" Their puffy eyes and weary faces told me they hadn't rested at all. James just looked at the house and muttered, "We can't stay there anymore." And honestly, I understood. That place had already stopped feeling like it belonged to us. It had once been a refuge. Now it was a stranger's house. "Mom won't stop crying," James added quietly. "And she won't get off the phone with that jerk, John." It was the first time I'd heard him curse. but I let it slide. I felt the same way. "Come on, both of you," I said gently. "We need to get to my place and talk everything through." The ride was heavy with silence. James stared blankly out the window, lost in thought. Elaine sat beside me, quietly crying, blotting her eyes with tissue after tissue. When we arrived, they rushed inside like they were escaping a storm. Shelley was already there, and so was Patsy. As soon as she saw Elaine, Patsy ran up and hugged her tightly. "I guess we're sisters now, huh?" she said. "I always wished I had one. I'm glad it's you. I just wish it didn't happen like this." Tears welled in my eyes again. The three of them cried together, holding each other. James stayed back, uncertain and silent. I walked over, wrapped an arm around his shoulders, and pulled him close. "It's going to be all right, James," I whispered. "I promise we'll figure this out." The young man, teetering on the edge of adulthood, gave a small nod and averted his gaze, clearly embarrassed that his tears had escaped. I pulled him into a full embrace then, holding him tightly as my own tears slid down my cheeks. "You'll always be my son, James," I murmured, my voice thick with emotion. "No matter what happens, I'm proud of you, and I'll always be here." He broke into another sob, and through trembling lips he whispered, "Thanks, Daddy." My heart clung to that moment, and we held each other silently, unwilling to let go. Sensing the right time, Shelley stepped in with her usual flair. "Well," she announced brightly, "now that everyone's cried it out and hugged it through, how about we sit down for a real family dinner?" She had already spread out pizza and drinks, creating a sense of normalcy that allowed us to breathe and collect ourselves. The rest of the afternoon slipped by peacefully, filled with gentle laughter as we lounged in the backyard. We didn't touch on the complicated mess that had brought us all together, but we did joke about the new, unexpected sibling bonds forming between the kids. Shelley and I sat quietly at times, marveling at how naturally our children blended together, all while aware of a quiet truth. I wasn't the biological father of her children, and she wasn't the birth mother of mine. We exchanged only a few glances that betrayed a touch of sadness, eclipsed by the warmth of the connection we had discovered with each other. Eventually, as evening settled in, Shelley and Patsy left, leaving me alone with James and Elaine. "You two let your mom know you're staying over, right?" I asked, not wanting a situation where the police might show up because someone thought the kids had gone missing. "Yeah," James replied. "We left her a note. Told her not to call us." His voice grew sharp with renewed frustration. I knew I had to help him come to terms with his new dynamic with Elaine. If not, it would haunt him. "James, Elaine, I know this hurts, I really do. I was so angry about everything that happened that I nearly gave up completely. The only reason I kept going, the only thing that brought me back to myself, was the two of you. What your mom did was aimed at me. I'm the one she made vows to. I'm the one who took the brunt of her betrayal. But she's still your mother. And once some time passes and you can look back more clearly, you'll remember how good a mom she was to you both. What she did in her marriage doesn't erase how she raised you." They listened quietly, though I could tell the words were hard for them to accept. Elaine finally broke the silence. "I understand, Dad. Can I still call you Daddy? I just can't get over how she hurt you. It hurts me too." I looked at them both and smiled gently. "Listen, I know I didn't give you life, but I've been your father in every way that matters, and that isn't going to change. My relationship with your mom is another story, but with you, I'll always be the same dad I've always been." I cracked a smile to lighten the moment. "The place might not be as fancy as our old house, but it's still your home, and I want you to feel safe here." Then I paused, a half-laugh escaping. "Yoda mode over," I said in my head. "Now enough with the serious stuff for tonight. Go pick a room, whichever one you want, if you're staying here. It's not the Ritz, but it's yours. Sleep well, and remember, I love you both." They got settled for the night, and I finally let myself unwind. This emotional storm had taken a real toll on me, mind and body. And truth be told, I wasn't as young as I used to be. The night before with Shelley had drained me almost completely. I couldn't help but wonder how she was holding up. And that was the final thought to pass through my mind before I sank into sleep, my head resting heavily on the pillow, vanishing into a boundless realm of dreams. By breakfast the following morning, I'd persuaded both kids to have a conversation with Ellie. It was clear she'd been deeply concerned about them, though the discussion quickly turned tense. They agreed to return home, but only on the condition that he wasn't there. They wanted absolutely nothing to do with John. I wasn't sure if Ellie and John were still living together, but she gave her word. I drove the kids back just before noon, keeping a sharp eye out for any unfamiliar vehicles in the area. Thankfully, the deal I'd had with the mechanic who'd been babysitting Ellie's car had ended, and she had her vehicle back. Once we arrived, the kids embraced me tightly before stepping into the house, comforted by my repeated assurances that I'd always be there for them. They knew how to reach me. My own life was shifting back into its routine. I was due to return to work, and I hoped things might begin to heal between the kids and Ellie. As they entered the house, Ellie appeared at the door, clearly preparing to say something. "Al, we need to," she began. I cut her off immediately. Without a word, I rolled up the window and reversed out of the driveway without a second glance. I had zero interest in talking to her. Not then. Sooner or later, I'd have to deal with her for the kids' sake. But not that day. Later, I met again with Jane, the lawyer. She didn't sugarcoat anything. "Al," she said bluntly, "as difficult as it is to accept, John has legal standing when it comes to your children. Metaphorically speaking, of course. Biologically, he's their father." It stung to hear, though I already knew. Elaine's an adult now, 19. She can choose who she lives with, but James is just 14. Until he turns 16, he legally needs a guardian. That'll be between you and Ellie, but she isn't obligated to let you be that person. She's his mother, and John is his lawful father. Like it or not, you're the outsider here. The words hit hard, though none were a surprise. Hearing them aloud just made it more real and more painful. She went on, "Let's proceed with the divorce. After that, we can reassess." Eventually, the divorce was finalized. As expected, there was no child support involved. What did surprise Jane was the asset division. I ended up with 40% of what we'd shared. She'd expected a far worse outcome. Elaine moved in with me full-time, though she occasionally spent nights at Ellie's place. The two of them had settled into an uneasy peace, neither warm nor hostile. I was genuinely glad Elaine found some measure of stability, but resentment simmered beneath the surface. Ellie seemed to have come out ahead in all this chaos, and that infuriated me. John was living in what used to be our home, along with Ellie and James. He kept his distance when Elaine was around. He knew she wouldn't tolerate him. Somehow, he'd managed to buy a high-end apartment, where he stayed when not with Ellie. Elaine told me that James had become increasingly withdrawn. He barely left his room anymore. He refused to eat meals with Ellie and John. The only time he showed signs of life was when Elaine came to visit. His relationship with Ellie was downright toxic. He could hardly be civil. Most of the time, he said nothing at all, unless directly addressed, and even then he replied with short, flat answers. With John, there was absolute silence. Coupled with the usual turbulence of adolescence, it was a dangerous mix. "I'm really scared for him, Dad," Elaine told me one day. "If something doesn't change soon, he's going to snap and make a mistake he'll carry forever." She'd been keeping tabs on him through mutual friends still in school. "He's been hanging around all the wrong people. He's getting into trouble with teachers. His grades are falling apart. He doesn't seem to care about anything anymore." Then came the question she dreaded asking. "What are we going to do, Dad?" I looked at my daughter, Lainey, my heart heavy with frustration. "I've done all I can," I told her quietly. "But the system isn't built to help us." It's tilted in his favor. There was nothing I could do legally. He wasn't my biological child, and the law tied my hands. Still, I wasn't out of options. I gave her a look, steeped in quiet rebellion. "There are other ways," I said, my voice low. Lainey listened, her expression shifting to something close to satisfaction as I laid out what I intended for that bastard. He was going to suffer. And once I was finished with him, he'd seriously consider disappearing for good. The key to it all was something I'd uncovered with a little creative legwork, though truthfully it wasn't exactly genius. The private investigator I hired had done what I paid him to do. Turns out, during his divorce from Shelley, John had hidden some serious money. He'd stashed cash in an offshore account, siphoning funds out over time. No wonder he was able to snap up a condo right after the split. Now it made sense. The PI couldn't pin down the original source of the money. Apparently, it started with a lump sum, 200 grand, from some distant family member. He never declared it in court. But what mattered more was the current balance, about $1 million. And the smug bastard was screwing over Ellie without blinking. I snarled at the thought. I'd bet everything he hadn't told Ellie about any of this. That explained how he could fund their little getaway spot so easily, even with Shelley still quietly sending him money. The investigator even uncovered the alias he'd used to hide the account during the divorce. James Long. That's who he pretended to be. Scumbag! Hiring that PI was one of my smarter decisions. I couldn't stop wondering how the guy managed to find all this out. The PI believed John had been accessing the offshore account through his own devices, probably his laptop or phone. There were no records of him ever visiting a foreign bank in person. He did have a safe deposit box locally, but hardly ever went there. Things were heating up. Lainey was fully committed now, maybe even more driven than I was. She was focused on discovering how John was tapping into that hidden wealth. She started spending more time with Ellie, which meant John was forced to keep his distance. It became a problem for him. Every time he left, he had to drag all his tech and documents with him. Eventually, he got careless. He left his laptop behind. That was the break we needed. Lainey called me immediately, her voice tight with adrenaline. Dad, he left, and the laptop's still here. She sounded breathless. I don't know the password or anything. What should I do? Stay put. I'll be there in 15, I told her. Just make sure your mom doesn't catch on. If she does, he'll come running back. She told Ellie she was locking herself in her room and didn't want to be disturbed for a few hours. That gave us just over 2 hours to make our move. Lainey met me on the street just beyond our old neighborhood, and I drove straight to a place I'd scoped out weeks earlier. I didn't know the guy personally, but we'd exchanged emails about a certain project. When I knocked, the door creaked open to reveal a scrawny, acne-ridden kid in his early 20s. What do you want, Grandpa? He asked, eyeing me suspiciously. Forget Grandpa, I shot back. I'm Al. We set this up a while ago. Are we doing this or not? He hesitated until he spotted Lainey behind me, then grudgingly let us in. So, are you the real deal? I asked, or just another waste of time? Chill, man, he replied. Give me an hour. This thing will be an open book. He took the laptop and started connecting it to all sorts of wires, USBs, HDMI cables, the works. I had no clue what he was doing technically, but I knew what I wanted. Full access to the files John had locked away. That's why we were here. It wasn't cheap, but if he could pull it off, John was finished. While the hacker mumbled to himself and tapped away, Lainey and I surveyed the space. It was pure chaos, scraps of gadgets strewn across every surface. Pizza boxes and old wrappers lay forgotten in corners. The only usable seating was in front of an elaborate setup of screens, currently showing John's login screen, flickering code scrolling underneath. No way I could live like this, but right now this filthy apartment was ground zero for justice. Roughly 40 minutes had gone by before the tech guy suddenly shouted, "Got it! We're in!" The login screen flickered, then switched to that jerk's desktop. We went straight for his browser and dug into his bookmarks. Sure enough, buried 2 folders deep was a tab labeled Bank of Greece. That's the one we selected. The site's login interface popped up, and the technician's screens lit up with the familiar stream of scrolling code. After another 50 minutes or so, the screen blinked, and characters filled in the login fields. We had cracked his credentials. Without wasting a second, I logged into the account. There it was, $900,000 and some change sitting there. I moved all but $10 to a separate account that had already been set up beforehand. That one was registered under the name K. Hader. A little part of me wondered if he'd catch the reference. We kept going, digging deeper into the hard drive and uncovered information about a safe deposit box. I wrote everything down, paid the tech guy his cut, and got the hell out. Time was tight. His laptop had to be returned without raising suspicion. Elaine came back, switched out the laptop, and casually told Ellie she'd be heading out again. We waited just around the block, and sure enough, the bastard drove up to Allie's place. Mere minutes after Elaine had gone. Jesus, that was fast. He must have been lurking nearby, just out of view. Back at my place, I tried to wrap my head around everything. How the hell did a regular accountant end up with nearly $1 million stashed away? He lived like any average suburban guy. The questions kept piling up. Why hide the money? And who was he hiding it from? Given how most banks overseas had started cooperating with government agencies to catch tax dodgers, he had to know it was only a matter of time before someone caught on. If my PI could track the funds that easily, the government definitely could too. I should have dug deeper earlier. Maybe the safety deposit box held the answers we were missing. That's where Elaine came in. I was back teaching again and had limited time. So she went to the city to check out the deposit box herself. She had every password and code we'd pulled from his laptop. That was her ticket in, hopefully. Had it been someone like me, a middle-aged man, they probably would have interrogated me to death. But Elaine, young, stunning, not even 20, knew exactly how to present herself. Dressed to impress, heels and all, she worked her charm like a pro. As I watched her go, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. My little girl had grown up too fast, but her performance worked. She breezed through the first layer of security, with a story about her stepdad being hospitalized. Once they saw she had all the right passwords and codes, they waved her through. Inside the box, she found a few accounting ledgers and a sealed envelope packed with smaller items. Not wanting to attract attention, she slipped everything into her purse and made her exit. As she walked out, she gave the security guard a sweet smile, leaned over to check her bag, and gave him a flash of cleavage that probably made his day. Back home, the contents were spread across the kitchen table. When I returned from school during lunch break, Elaine looked shaken, pale, nervous. "Dad, you won't believe what was in there," she said. "Look at this." She handed me 2 passports. I opened the first one. The guy's face stared back at me, but the name read Bruce Williams, an Australian passport. The second one featured Ellie's unmistakable photo, but it was issued to Anne Williams. Mrs. Anne Williams, also Australian. What the hell was going on? And then I remembered. My daughter was still standing there. He'd been preparing to disappear. Everything pointed to an escape plan. He had intended to vanish with your mother, Elaine. The divorce must have thrown a wrench into their plans, at least for a time. Take a look at this. 2 one-way tickets from L.A. to Sydney, both under the name Conta, booked a full 2 weeks ahead. Obviously, your mother never boarded that plane. She made plenty of poor decisions, but I don't believe for a second she'd willingly abandon you or James. There's more to this than we thought. Elaine sat stunned, processing the bombshell, but she kept rummaging through the documents scattered across the table. "Dad, check out this photo," she said, pulling one out. "It's him, the bastard." But this was when he was around my age. She had started calling him that now. I looked at the photo and recognized him instantly. It was from our college days. There he was, looking sharp and full of himself. Next to him stood another student I hadn't thought about in years. Then it hit me. Jesus, that's Jimmy Lamont. My daughter didn't catch my reaction right away. Jimmy Lamont, son of the notorious mobster Al Lamont. No one liked Jimmy at school. He flaunted his money, made unwanted advances on women, just an entitled punk. And this guy, the bastard, had been close with him. He must have kept it well hidden. I never picked up on it, and there was certainly no sign that he and your mother had any kind of relationship back then. Looking back, I must have been completely blind. After sorting through most of what was in the envelope, I turned my attention to the ledgers. At first glance, they looked like standard accounting books. Nothing exciting. Just regular deposits and withdrawals tied to an account under J. Lamont's name. I figured he must have been handling finances for the operation. Then I opened the second ledger. This one was different. Only deposits, until a recent massive withdrawal stood out. An apartment, I speculated. The name tied to this account? James Long. The very same account we had just cracked open. Either the bastard was being paid $10,000 a pop for his hush-hush accounting work, or he'd siphoned money from Jimmy's account. Either way, things were beginning to align. "Elaine, we've kicked over a hornet's nest," I told her. "This could spell big trouble, not just for us, but especially for him and your mother. I couldn't care less what happens to him. But your mom, well, that's a different story. I know I resent her deeply. Sorry, Lainey, but I'd never wish her dead. And if the rumors about the Lamont family are even half true, crossing them could have deadly consequences. We had to tread lightly." Elaine turned pale again. "Do you think they know it was us?" she asked softly. The same thought had been gnawing at me. I hope not, I replied. We had to erase our footprints fast. I brought the journals to school and had the teacher's aide duplicate them. The passports were copied too. Elaine returned the originals to the safe deposit box, but I held on to Ellie's fake passport and the flight voucher. At the bank, the young security guard flashed a polite smile at Elaine, clearly captivated by her, but this time she didn't even glance his way. Later, Elaine and I debated our next steps. Her mother was in real danger. If Al Lamont caught wind of this betrayal, of that bastard skimming from him, it'd be over for him. And Ellie? She could become collateral damage. She had to distance herself from him, completely and immediately. But that wasn't likely. They'd been partying and secretly married behind my back longer than my entire relationship with Ellie had lasted. He had to be removed from the picture. And Ellie had to vanish, go underground with her assumed identity. One set of the copied journals was meant for Al's mailbox. Ellie needed to disappear before anyone connected her to the bastard. But how was I going to get her to go along with it? I picked up the phone and dialed her number. She didn't answer immediately, probably wondering why I was calling after all this time, considering I'd deliberately ignored every attempt she'd made to reach out since the divorce. "Alan, this is unexpected," she said, her voice cautious. "We need to meet, Ellie." "Right away," I said. "It's about James," I lied, quickly adding, "no questions now. Meet me at Bean's Coffee in 15 minutes. I ended the call before she could probe further. When she arrived, she looked shaken, almost ghostly. "What's going on, Alan?" she asked, sitting down quickly. "Did something happen to James?" "What is it?" I motioned for her to sit across from me. I didn't say anything. Instead, I pulled out a forged passport and set it on the table in front of her. Open. She glanced down, then froze when she realized the photo was hers. "What is this?" she said sharply, eyes narrowing. "Is this a joke?" "That's not mine. Where did you even get this?" I waited patiently as her questions tumbled out. Her reaction seemed genuine. She looked just as blindsided as I had been when I first saw the document. I slid 2 plane tickets across the table next. Real ones. "Looks like your boyfriend had plans to get both of you out of the country, Mrs. Williams." Her face went even whiter. "What are you talking about?" "I would never leave my kids behind," she said in disbelief. "Yes, things have been hard since our divorce, but I love them. They're John's too." Then she hesitated, bit her tongue, realizing too late that she'd finally confirmed it out loud. The kids weren't mine. "You're seriously defending that lying bastard?" I said, my voice rising. "That smug piece of shit who carried on behind my back with your help for nearly 2 decades? You think he has a conscience?" I was almost shouting now. People around us had stopped pretending not to listen. Ellie looked alarmed, clearly not used to seeing me like this. "I'm done," she said, rising from her chair. But before she could leave, I pulled out a few magazines and placed them on the table. "What now?" she asked, frowning. "More fakes?" "Just look," I told her. She did, and recognition hit her instantly. These weren't forgeries. She'd always been the one managing our accounts. She knew exactly what she was seeing. "Ellie," I said, my voice calmer now, "turns out your dear John has been playing you too. He's been stealing money, serious money, and not from me, from Al Lamont." She looked stricken, speechless. "Yeah, that guy you chose over me? He's not just a homewrecker, he's a thief. And when Al figures it out, and he will, anyone tied to John is going to be in danger." I let it hang in the air for a moment. "And by danger," I continued, "I mean you might find yourself sold off to some hellhole in Mexico. Or worse, face down in the desert." Her complexion drained even further. At that point, one of the waitresses came over, clearly concerned. "Ma'am, are you okay? Can I get you something?" Ellie didn't respond. The waitress gave a puzzled glance, then walked away. I leaned in. "I'm not going to sugarcoat this. You need to vanish. Now. Australia. Fake passport. Flight voucher. No second chances." I saw the mix of fear and disbelief on her face and pressed on. "The Lamonts have always known who you were with," I said bitterly, "and I'm done pretending that any of this was ever okay." I paused to steady myself. "But there's something else. You need to sign over custody of James to me. And the house. We're putting it in trust for James and Elaine. It's non-negotiable. I placed a yellow envelope on the table in front of her. Don't get it twisted, Ellie, I said. I'm not doing this out of love or forgiveness. I paused. That's not true, I added almost in a whisper. I do still have feelings for you. Her eyes met mine, wide, disbelieving. Alan, she started, but I cut her off before she could finish. I feel nothing but a burning, absolute loathing for you. Disgust. That you could betray me, our marriage, and the children like this, I'll never understand it. You spat on the love and respect I gave you. I paused, then added coldly, I'm only offering you a way out, because you're the mother of James and Elaine. I love them more than anything, and they deserve to have their mother alive, not dumped in some back alley in Mexico after being passed around like trash. As for that piece of scum you're running off with, I couldn't care less. Let him rot under the desert sun for all I care. Now, sign the documents and disappear. Leave the country. Leave our lives. This is your last opportunity. Ellie took the stack of papers from the table, her hands trembling. She scanned through them, then scribbled her signature at the bottom. Tears streamed down her face. Alan, this means I've forfeited any right to see the kids. Congratulations, I snapped. Now you finally understand what it felt like for me when I uncovered your long-running betrayal. Without another word, I pushed my chair back and walked out of the cafe. The room let out a collective breath, as if the tension had been suffocating them all. Still, many eyes stayed on Ellie, now left alone and weeping silently at her table. The following day, James showed up at my doorstep with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Hey, Dad, he said, confused. Mom left a note saying I should come here. She said I might be staying for a while. Most of her stuff is gone, like she's not coming back. I looked at him, my son, my boy, and gave him a calm smile. It's all right, James. I'll explain everything when the time is right. For now, just settle in. Elaine came running down the stairs, gave her brother a tight hug, and helped him take his things to his new room. 2 days passed. The morning paper carried a report. John Jefferson, recently divorced and well known around town, had vanished without a trace. Speculation was already flying. He might have ties to a dangerous criminal organization. Authorities were investigating. On the following page, another story. A suburban home destroyed by fire. We knew the place well. It was our old house. Police believed it had been ransacked before the fire was set, likely during a failed break-in attempt. The structure was completely gutted. James and Elaine lived with me from then on. James stayed until Elaine left for college. By sheer coincidence, or fate, her cousin Patsy had enrolled there too. Later, Shelley sold her home and moved in with us. It worked out well. James often drifted off to sleep with music playing through his headphones, lost in his favorite songs. The offshore account remained untouched, growing quietly until we had need of it. After all, a teacher's salary doesn't stretch that far.